My son abandoned his autistic daughter until she built a $5M restaurant. Then he showed up with a lawyer. I was 62 when Jack brought her to my door. I had not seen my son in over 8 months, not since he quit his 3rd job in a year and moved in with a woman half his age. That morning, I was pulling weeds from the corner of my garden, watching the autumn fog settle over the hills behind my house. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel, then the sharp slam of a car door. Jack stood there, looking thinner than I remembered. His clothes were wrinkled, his face pale and anxious. But it was not him that stopped my breath. It was the child hiding behind his legs. She could not have been older than 5 years old, tiny, almost doll-like, holding a stuffed gray cat so worn its eyes had faded. Her dark hair was tied in a lopsided ponytail, and her face looked like it had not smiled in a long time. "This is Lily," Jack said, gesturing vaguely. I blinked. "Your daughter?" "Yeah. Listen, I need you to take her for a while." "What?" "Jack, what do you mean? Where's her mother?" "She left," he muttered, then added, too quickly, "Just for a few weeks, okay? I'll come back once things settle down." I looked down at the girl. She did not meet my gaze. She stared off toward the trees, her arms wrapped around that stuffed animal like a life vest. Something in me tightened. "Jack, this little girl, she's not just quiet, is she?" "She's autistic," he cut in flatly. "Doctors say she's got issues with speech, eye contact, sensory stuff, whatever. I do not have time to deal with that right now." I stepped forward. "Son, she needs you. You cannot just drop her here like—" Jack snorted and gave a cold, crooked smile. "She needs me? You are one to talk. You have been living like a hermit in this moldy old cabin, living quietly, talking to birds and old books. You're practically as shut in as she is." He shoved a worn suitcase onto the porch. "Face it, Mom. The only real value you have left is free childcare." Then he turned around, walked down the steps, and drove off without looking back. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I stood on the porch as the dust from his tires settled. Lily remained frozen where he had left her. She did not cry. She did not ask for him. She just stood, staring into the trees. I brought her inside. She did not speak that first day, or the second. She did not eat, barely drank water, refused to meet my eyes. She spent hours sitting by the window, gripping that toy cat, her face as still as stone. I left food by her side. It went untouched. I spoke gently. She did not respond. I tried cartoons, toys, music, silence. Nothing reached her, and yet, I felt her watching. When I moved, her eyes flicked. When I turned my back, I could feel her attention like a whisper behind me. There was someone inside that silence, a someone I did not know how to reach. I was an old woman, a retired school teacher. I had spent my life helping other people's children learn their ABCs, solve fractions, survive middle school heartbreaks. But this child, my own granddaughter, she was beyond the reach of everything I had ever learned. By the 3rd night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at her untouched plate. I was exhausted, afraid, angry at Jack, at myself, at the silence that filled this house like smoke. And then I remembered. When Jack was little 4 or 5, throwing tantrums, hiding under the bed for hours, there was only one thing that calmed him. Chicken soup. Real soup, the kind that takes all day. Bones boiled down to nothing. Carrots were sweet enough to melt. Onions were soft as silk. Rosemary, garlic, warmth. I went to the kitchen. My hands shook a little as I chopped. My knees ached as I stood, but I cooked. And as the broth began to steam, something changed. Lily lifted her head. She sniffed the air. She stood, slowly, and walked into the kitchen without a word. I said nothing, just poured the soup into a bowl and set it before her. She climbed onto the chair, took the spoon, dipped it, tasted. And then, only then, she looked up at me and whispered her very first words. "This is good, Grandma." Her voice was barely louder than breath, but it landed in me like thunder. That was the moment I knew. She would stay, and I would fight for her every single day. By the end of day 1, I knew this was not going to be easy. Lily did not eat, not a bite, not even a sip of water if I was watching. I tried everything I could think of: warm milk with honey, soft oatmeal with cinnamon, applesauce, crackers shaped like animals. She would push the plate away, or worse, stare right through it like it did not exist. I tried feeding her by hand, coaxing her with gentle tones. No reaction. I even played old cartoons Jack used to like, hoping the sounds might catch her interest. Nothing. I began to wonder if something deeper was wrong. Not just her silence, but her body. Was she in pain? Was she sick? She would not let me check, would not let me near. By day 2, she looked paler, more withdrawn. I called 2 pediatricians. No appointments available until the next week. The emergency room was 2 hours away, and I knew she would not tolerate a car ride. I watched her shrink further into herself and felt something inside me unravel. I had raised a child already. I had handled tantrums, fevers, broken bones, schoolyard fights. But this was different. This was a child who had been dropped into my world like a ghost, quiet, watchful, impenetrable. On the 3rd day, she started rocking, sitting in the corner by the window, arms around her knees, moving back and forth in a slow, rhythmic sway. Her eyes never blinked. Her stuffed cat sat on her lap, clutched tight. I sat on the couch across from her, trying not to cry. I did not know what else to do. But then, like a thread pulling itself loose from memory, something surfaced. Jack, 4 years old, hiding under the dining table. He had gone 2 days without eating after his first bout of chickenpox. I had cooked chicken soup, real soup, and left it by the door. Within minutes, he had crawled out, nose first, spoon in hand. That was when I learned. Some children do not respond to words. But smell, warmth, that they understand. So on the morning of day 4, before the sun fully rose, I lit the stove and pulled out my old stock pot. It had scratches down its sides and a dent from the time Jack tried to use it as a helmet, but it still held heat better than any pot I had ever owned. I cleaned the bones. I chopped carrots, onions, celery. I sautéed the garlic low and slow in olive oil until the kitchen filled with that deep, golden scent. I added rosemary, a hint of lemon peel. Covered the pot, let it simmer. The house came alive with the smell. And that was when it happened. I heard the floorboards creak, quiet steps behind me. I turned and saw her, Lily, standing at the kitchen doorway. She was sniffing. She did not say a word, but her body leaned forward, just slightly, toward the pot. My heart ached with hope. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" I asked softly, though I knew better than to expect an answer. I ladled the soup into a white ceramic bowl, placed it on the table, and pulled out a chair. Then I stepped back. She stared at it, her fingers flexed around her stuffed cat. And then slowly she walked forward. She climbed into the chair, picked up the spoon with both hands, dipped it into the bowl. I held my breath. She brought the spoon to her lips and took one small sip. Then another. And then she paused, looked up at me, and spoke. "This is good, Grandma." 6 words. Her first. They were not loud, they were not clear, but they were real. I covered my mouth, tears pooling before I could stop them. I nodded, afraid to move, afraid to break the spell. She kept eating, spoon after spoon, like her body had remembered something it had forgotten it needed. Food. Warmth. Me. That day, something opened between us. Not like a door, more like a window cracked just enough to let in air. From then on, every meal became a kind of conversation. She did not talk much, not yet. But I learned to listen to the way she stirred things, the way she tasted and blinked when something was too salty, the way she hummed, almost imperceptibly, when she liked a dish. I started keeping notes, which flavors made her tense up, which textures made her retreat. I paid attention, like I had never paid attention to anything in my life. And more than that, I taught. I showed her how to hold a spoon properly, how to crack eggs without breaking the yolk. I showed her how to listen for the sizzle of garlic at just the right temperature. I talked while I cooked, even when she did not answer. I narrated every step like a recipe show. Then I began showing her videos, MasterChef Junior, MasterChef Australia, anything with subtitles and visuals. She liked the colors, the movements. She watched with focus that would surprise most adults. She was not learning through language. She was learning through eyes and nose, sound and taste. I ordered picture-based cookbooks. We played Guess the Spice games. We explored the textures of fruits and vegetables. I let her break things, spill things, play. Within weeks, she could make toast and jam with precision. By the end of the second month, she was helping me peel, stir, plate, and every now and then, when I handed her something just right, she would look at me, smile softly, and say again, "This is good, Grandma." Those words were our anchor. I had lost my son to selfishness. But in return, I had been given a granddaughter whose language was food, whose world was silent but rich, and who, in the warmth of a kitchen, was beginning to find her way out. And I would walk beside her every step of that path. By the time Lily turned 7, I had stopped wondering whether she would ever speak like other children. She spoke, just not with words. She spoke with her hands, her eyes, the way she tilted her head when something intrigued her. She spoke with silence, with attention, and most of all, she spoke through food. What began as a daily survival ritual, getting her to eat, had become something sacred between us. We cooked together nearly every day. It was the only time she seemed fully present, fully alive. Not fidgeting, not drifting, not rocking back and forth the way she sometimes did when the world got too loud. She would sniff tomatoes before choosing them, press herbs between her fingers and close her eyes. I had never seen someone smell with such intention. If the thyme was old, she would wrinkle her nose. If the garlic was fresh, her lips would part, ever so slightly. Her sense of smell was sharper than mine. It humbled me. By 8, she could tell when oil was hot enough just by the pitch of the sizzle. Too sharp, she would whisper, if it hissed too fast. Not ready, if it bubbled too slow. She never guessed. She knew. I began documenting her progress, not because I wanted to brag, but because I needed someone else to see it too. I filmed her folding batter, adjusting salt, recognizing ingredients by scent alone. I sent the videos to the therapist Jack had listed on one of Lily's old medical forms. The woman wrote back only once, but she said something that stayed with me. "You are not just teaching her to cook, you are teaching her to connect and to trust her own senses. That's therapy. You are doing therapy." Still, I never used that word around Lily. To her, we were just cooking, living, breathing in the kitchen air that always smelled like butter and rosemary and steam. At 9, she stopped needing recipes. She began inventing. One afternoon, she brought me a spoonful of something she had made while I was outside pulling weeds. "Taste," she said simply. The sauce was creamy, tangy, with a strange but delightful citrus kick. When I asked her what was in it, she pointed at a lemon, then at a small jar of mustard I had nearly forgotten existed. I stared at her, stunned. "Did you just create this?" She nodded once, then turned away and went back to stirring. 10 was when everything changed. It was the day after her 10th birthday. We had not celebrated with a party, crowds still overwhelmed her, but I had made a cake, and she had eaten 2 slices with quiet joy. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of sautéed onions. I thought I was dreaming. But when I reached the kitchen, I found her standing on a stool, barefoot, apron tied backwards, stirring a pot of broth. The sunlight caught the strands of her hair, and for a moment, I just stood there and watched. She noticed me and gestured for me to sit. No words, just a look. I sat. She served me a bowl. It was chicken soup, but not my chicken soup. It was hers. The broth was lighter, with notes of fresh dill. The carrots were cut thinner, almost decorative. There was a warmth to it I could not place, like the flavor had been aged, not rushed. It smelled perfect. I lifted the spoon. I tasted. And I cried. Because somehow, this little girl, this silent, odd, beautiful child, had taken everything I had ever taught her and turned it into something that felt like home. It was not just that the soup was good. It was that it tasted like memory, like care, like thank you. She sat across from me, watching, not eating, just watching. Her hands in her lap, eyes fixed on my face. I wiped my tears and smiled. "Lily," I whispered, "this is the best thing anyone has ever made for me." She gave a small nod, then finally said, "For you." After that day, she took over most of the cooking. She did it quietly, without expectation. She still did not speak often, but I knew, without fail, when I walked into that kitchen at 5 o'clock and found a bowl waiting, it was her way of saying, "I see you. I'm here. I love you." Some nights it was soup. Other nights it was roasted vegetables with delicate sauces I never would have dreamed of pairing. Once she made a dish with apples and pork that made me gasp out loud. Another time, she recreated a pasta I had not eaten since my honeymoon in Venice. She had never been to Italy. She had never even seen me make that dish. But she had felt it. Somewhere. Her palate was extraordinary. Her timing, instinctive. And her silence? It was no longer something to mourn. It was something I began to understand. She was not absent from the world. She was listening to it more deeply than anyone I had ever known. At 10 years old, Lily had become the heart of our home. Her food was the glue that held us together, and though Jack had never called, never returned, never once sent a card or a check, I stopped waiting. I had her. She had me. And in that kitchen, with flour on her cheeks and soup on the stove, she was becoming whole, not fixed, not changed, just fully herself. The world outside could be as loud and cruel as it wanted. Inside this house, inside our kitchen, there was love. And it was warm, and it smelled like butter. Mildred arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, just as the rain began tapping against the kitchen windows. She had always been dramatic like that, never simply showed up. Always arrived. Big scarf and glasses, dragging a well-traveled suitcase. We had not seen each other in nearly 12 years. She'd been a top critic at the Oregon table for years, sharp, feared by chefs, and adored by readers. Her reviews could make or break a restaurant. But she had retired quietly, disappeared to somewhere near Portland, and we had mostly kept in touch through birthday cards and the occasional recipe scribbled on napkins. I had told her, years back, about Lily, but I had never asked her to come. Still, there she was, standing in my kitchen with damp boots and perfume that smelled like pine needles and coffee. "I had a dream about soup," she said, shrugging off her coat. "Thought it meant something, so I got in the car." When she spotted Lily peeking from behind the living room doorway, she smiled softly. "So, this is the girl." Lily was 15 then, taller, still quiet, still shy around strangers, but in the kitchen, she moved like water, steady, certain, unafraid. "She is not much for small talk," I said gently. "Good," Mildred replied. "Most people ruin food by talking too much anyway." I had told Lily we would have a guest, that someone might be joining us for dinner. I had not said who. Lily nodded, as always, and slipped into her apron without a word. She chose the menu. Saffron tagliatelle, seared salmon, blood orange cream sauce with fresh tarragon. I did not help. I watched. She boiled the pasta from scratch, flour dusting her cheeks. She zested the oranges with care, cut the herbs with precision, seared the fish skin until it crackled like leaves underfoot. Mildred sat at the table, eyes following every movement, mouth shut for once in her life. And when Lily placed the plate in front of her carefully, silently, Mildred leaned forward, took one bite, and froze. She chewed slowly. Then again. Then again. Then she put the fork down, pressed her hand against her chest, and I swear to you this woman, who had eaten foie gras in France and lamb in Morocco and truffles shaved over risotto in Rome, she began to cry. Not loudly, just tears falling like they had been waiting years to be allowed. "Vivian," she whispered, "this is not a meal." She turned toward me, her voice thick. "This is culinary genius." I did not speak. My throat tightened. Lily stood at the sink, rinsing a spoon, unaware of the magnitude of what had just happened. "She is a prodigy," Mildred continued, now rising from her chair. "A natural-born chef. No formal training, no language needed. She thinks in taste, in balance. Do you understand how rare that is?" I nodded. Then she looked at me, serious as a prayer. "Let me take her. Let me teach her properly. This girl deserves a real kitchen, real tools, real guidance." I hesitated. Lily had never left my side for more than a day. She still struggled with new environments, unfamiliar routines, too much noise. The thought of her in a bustling professional kitchen made my heart clench. "She does not talk much," I said. Mildred's reply was soft, firm. "She does not have to." "I mean it," I said. "Do not push her. Do not make her explain herself. Just let her be as she is." Mildred took my hand and nodded. "I promise." I spoke with Lily that night, told her about Mildred, about kitchens with real flames and silver counters and knives sharp enough to cut through frozen butter. Lily listened, chewing the edge of her sleeve. Then she asked one thing. "You come?" I smiled. "Not every day, but you can call me, and I will wait right here every evening to hear what you made." She paused, then nodded. That was all the consent we ever needed. So it began. 3 mornings a week, I drove her into town, to the small private kitchen Mildred had converted from an old bakery. It was quiet, controlled, full of sunlight and stainless steel. Mildred hired one assistant, gentle, patient, and let Lily work without deadlines. She never once asked Lily to speak. Instead, she gave her textures, temperatures, flavors, and Lily absorbed it all. She watched once, then did it perfectly the second time. She never needed things repeated. She wrote nothing down. But she remembered everything. Within 6 months, she could recreate a Moroccan tagine with preserved lemon from taste alone. By the end of the first year, Mildred said, half joking, "I should be paying her to teach me." She was not wrong. Lily had found her language. And for the first time in her life, someone outside our little world understood her fluently. She was still quiet, still hesitant in crowds. But in that kitchen, she was undeniable. And it was just the beginning. She opened the restaurant on her 20th birthday. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the air smells like cinnamon and wood smoke. Mildred wore pearls. I wore my old floral dress and the brooch Jack had given me before he stopped being someone I recognized. Lily didn't wear white or black or anything that might shout for attention. Just a deep moss-green apron, tied carefully at her waist, her hair braided low down her back. The sign above the entrance was simple, carved into reclaimed wood. "Return." The name was hers. When I asked her why months before, during a quiet walk through the orchard near our house, she simply said, "Because everything I love is here." I understood. The restaurant sat at the corner of Main and 3rd, in a repurposed brick building with windows that drank sunlight and floors that still creaked when you stepped just right. Inside, Lily had chosen every detail. No cold chrome, no pretentious decor, just warm wood, linen curtains, soft jazz playing low through vintage speakers. It looked like a memory. Smelled like one, too. We built it together. Mildred provided the capital, the connections, the lawyers. I provided the paperwork, the co-signatures, the name on the deed. But the soul, every plate, every spoon, every flicker of rosemary in the air that belonged to Lily. She called her signature dish memory soup. It was a refined version of the first chicken soup I had made for her. The same soft carrots, the same garlic base. But now with slow-roasted chicken confit, saffron-infused broth, a hint of lemongrass, and a finishing oil made of browned butter and dill. She served it in porcelain bowls, each one custom-made with a gold engraving inside the rim that read, "Grandma." Not Vivian. Just Grandma. That was enough. The first day we opened, there were 12 customers. By the end of the second week, the waiting list stretched 3 months. By month 2, the Portland Chronicle ran a full feature with the headline, "The Chef of Silence. Meet the young woman who speaks through taste." They told our story how Lily, once thought unreachable, had built a restaurant that made grown men cry over soup. More articles followed. Bon Appetit called her a genius of restraint. The New York Times said, "Her flavors do not shout. They whisper until you lean in, and then they devastate you." One critic wrote, "She doesn't speak, but her food says everything you need to know about healing, about grace, about what it means to be seen." The name Return was more than a restaurant. It became a brand. A place where strangers came not just to eat, but to feel, to remember their grandmothers, to cry without apology, to go back, if only for one meal, to a time before they were broken. Within 2 years, Mildred helped expand to Seattle, then San Francisco. By the end of the 3rd year, we were fielding offers from investors all over the country, but Lily turned down most of them. She refused to franchise just for money. Her rule was simple. If the kitchen didn't smell like a home, it wasn't a return. So the menu stayed small, the portions modest, and the soup, her soup, never changed. Every bowl still came engraved with Grandma, and every week she brought me one. Sometimes after closing, she would drive back to our little house, tired but radiant, and place it on the table in front of me. No words, just that same look she gave me the first time I fed her. As if to say, "I'm still here, I haven't forgotten." One night, she brought a small stack of articles, all the press, printed and clipped. She handed them to me and waited. I read slowly, tracing each word with the same care I used to trace her palm when she was a child, trying to calm her down during storms. When I looked up, she was watching. I whispered, "I am proud of you." She smiled. And then she spoke soft, clear, like sunlight through leaves. "I'm proud of you too." It was not about the $5 million or the fame. It was about the girl who once could not eat, now feeding the world. And it was about me, the woman once called worthless, being written into every bite of her legacy. The restaurant was named Return. But what Lily had given me was everything I never thought would come back. He came back wearing a blazer he could not afford, and a face I barely recognized. Jack had been gone for 15 years. No call, no letter, no dollar. He vanished from our lives the day he left Lily on my porch and never looked back. I had trained myself to stop hoping, to stop imagining one day he might knock on the door with regret in his eyes. I had grieved my son like he was dead. Then, one morning, he returned. But not alone. He walked into Return, flanked by a man in a navy suit, with a briefcase and a smirk, the kind of man who made his living cleaning up other people's messes or making them look clean. I was wiping down the counter when I saw them. Jack did not look older so much as worn out. His skin was sallow from too many sleepless nights. His hair was thinner, his belt tighter than it used to be. Lily was not in the kitchen at that moment. He looked around like he owned the place. "So," he said loudly, "this is what you did with my kid." I stood there, the rag frozen in my hand. The lawyer stepped forward. "Are you Vivian Carter?" I nodded once. He opened the briefcase, pulled out a thick folder, and handed it to me. "We are here today to initiate guardianship reclamation for Mr. Jack Carter regarding his biological daughter, Lily Carter. We are also serving notice that all intellectual property and assets developed under the brand Return are subject to parental claim under Oregon Family Statute Code 109.119. I stared at the pages. Jack chuckled and crossed his arms. "You think you could keep $5 million locked away in a soup bowl forever?" My voice barely came out. "You left her." "I left her with family." He shrugged. "She's my daughter. That means everything she owns is mine." The room went silent. Customers froze mid-bite. A server dropped a tray in the back. And then, from the hallway behind the kitchen, Lily appeared. She had been listening. She stood perfectly still, apron on, hands dusted with flour, her eyes locked on his. Jack's face twitched into something like a smile. "There's my girl." She did not move. He tried again. "You look good, sweetheart. Grown. Like your mom used to, before she, well, never mind that." The lawyer stepped in, glancing between them. "Miss Carter, you are 20 years old, yes?" Lily nodded once. "You've been under the informal custody of your grandmother. However, Mr. Carter is here to assert parental rights and claim shared ownership of your restaurant's brand as legal guardian and blood parent. We have documents to support ongoing financial contribution, including wire transfers and signed agreements." "They're fake," I said suddenly, voice sharp. Jack's head snapped toward me. "Excuse me?" "You never sent a cent, never signed anything. I raised her, alone." His eyes narrowed. "Do you have proof of that?" Lily stepped forward and gently touched my arm. Her voice was soft, steady. "Let him talk, Grandma." It was the same tone she used when she tasted soup too early, when she needed another minute before the flavors settled. Then she turned to Jack. "Are you hungry?" He blinked. "What?" "You came all this way," she said, still quiet. "Let me make you something." He laughed. "Well, I guess we can eat while we talk about paperwork." Lily nodded, turned, and walked back into the kitchen. She began to cook. Not in a hurry, not flustered, just focused, measuring flour, heating oil, slicing scallions so thin they curled like ribbons. She made soup, but not memory soup. This one was different. A broth of multiple cultures, French base, Thai aromatics, Vietnamese fish sauce, American chicken stock, served with toast points shaped like torn pieces of a map, a fusion of everywhere and nowhere. When it was ready, she placed the bowl in front of Jack. He looked suspicious. "What is this?" She smiled politely. "A dish called inheritance." He picked up the spoon, tasted it. At first, he nodded. Then he frowned, then paused. His throat twitched. His eyes watered. Something he did not know what hit him deep. "What's in this?" he asked, voice catching. She tilted her head. "Everything you missed." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Jack's voice rose. "What is this? Some kind of trick? You think food can erase the law?" Lily said nothing. She simply placed a small folder beside his bowl. Inside were printed pages. Copies of every school registration I had filled out as guardian. Every hospital bill I paid. Photos of her birthday cakes from age 5 to 20, each with my handwriting on the candles. Handwritten menus she had made for me, one each year, on Thanksgiving. There were also affidavits from teachers, neighbors, doctors, all stating that Jack had been absent since 2005, never showed up, never asked. Then there was a statement from Mildred, legally notarized, confirming that every cent invested in return had come from her and me, not Jack. Confirming Lily's original signature on the brand copyright at age 18. Lastly, there was a video. I had forgotten about it. It was from the year Lily turned 16. In it, she looked into the camera and said, slowly, "My name is Lily Carter. I do not talk much. But my grandma gave me a voice. I want this restaurant to be ours, no one else's." Jack stared at the footage. His hand shook. Then he stood. "This isn't over," he spat. Lily looked at him calm, unblinking. "You're full," she said quietly. "You just don't know what of." He stormed out. The lawyer followed, papers flapping. I sat down, weak with relief. Lily stood beside me. No smile, just peace. That was her way. No shouting, no drama. Just a meal you could not lie your way through. A taste that told the truth. And that day, justice was served hot and unforgettable. I walked into the courthouse with a calm I did not feel. My fingers clutched the edge of my coat pocket, where I'd hidden a small notebook full of menu sketches and meal dates. Outside, the morning air was crisp, and the columned building rose like a judge's stern verdict in stone. I felt 82 years old and more alive than I'd felt in decades. My granddaughter, Lily Carter, walked beside me in silence. Nothing flashy, no speech prepared because she needed no words. Her eyes held something stronger, a lifetime of being heard in the kitchen. Justice had a strange flavor today. The first witness was the lawyer for her father, Jack Carter. He laid out the papers first, thick folders of proof that Jack claimed showed 11 years of distant support, monthly phone calls, financial transfers, promises kept. The brevity of his tone contrasted sharply with the volume of his documents. They looked professional, stamped, but they felt hollow. Then Jack stood, and in a voice meant to carry weight, said, "My daughter has a brand built on my name. I am her father. I deserve my share. I have supported her. I have visited. I have rights." I listened. I nodded. I let him speak. But while he talked, Lily was preparing something else. She returned to the table, carrying 7 plates. One by one, each dish a chapter, each garnish a memory. The first, a bowl of the chicken soup that had broken her silence when she was 5. The broth glowed softly, the aroma gentle but unmistakable. I saw the judge glance up. The second, saffron tagliatelle with seared salmon and a citrus cream sauce, the same dish she prepared at 15 when her mentor, Mildred Farrington, declared she was a culinary genius. The third, a loaf of bread, baked to crisp perfection, inscribed with the word "return" in the crust the name of her restaurant. The next 4, dishes I did not fully understand at the moment, but each came with a small packet on the side, a sealed envelope containing a tax receipt, a photo of the kitchen on opening night, a video clip of Lily plating the dish at age 17, a notarized document showing the brand registration. The room grew quieter as each dish was placed. The air smelled of thyme, rosemary, browned butter, memories I thought I had buried with time. The judge inhaled. The lawyers shifted. Then the final moment. A video played on the big screen. It showed Jack's voice angry, raw. "She's only good for being babysat, for sitting quietly in the corner. A waste of space." The little girl in the video sat at the halfway eaten soup bowl he had once ordered her to finish. Her eyes fixed on the camera, she did not cry. Jack turned bright red. The judge, a woman with steel in her voice, leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, these dishes and the documented evidence linked to them constitute irrefutable proof of your abandonment. Miss Carter's rightful ownership of her work, and the lack of your contribution over the years." Jack tried to reach into his briefcase for another folder. It slid from his hands. He flushed. "I withdraw my claim," he muttered. The bailiff called for order. The judge's gavel struck. "Case dismissed. Mr. Carter is to be investigated for forgery and extortion. All rights to the brand, return. Remain with Miss Carter and her grandmother." Outside, the press gathered. Flashbulbs, microphones. One reporter asked me, "Mrs. Carter, how does it feel?" I answered quietly, "I cook what I love. She cooked what she remembers." And Lily, next to me, didn't say a word. She folded her hands and breathed, as though the rush of emotions inside her were the steam rising from a perfect soup. That night, at the quiet house near the orchard, we sat at our own table. She brought the 3 of us, the 2 women who never gave up a small plate of the chicken soup that started it all. We ate in silence. And in that silence, I heard everything. The plates were full. My heart was full. Justice? It tasted like the warm broth of something more. Recognition, respect, a voice that was finally heard. 2 years passed like steam rising from a simmering pot. Lily was 22 now, and she spoke. Not constantly, not loudly. But when she spoke, her voice carried something most people lacked: deliberateness. Still soft, still measured, but it came with a quiet certainty, like every word had been weighed in the heart before being spoken. She smiled more, too. The kind of smile that didn't beg for approval, didn't flutter or flee. A grounded, grateful smile. The kind you carry when you've built something lasting from a silence most people never survive. And she was in love. Paul had once been just another apprentice in Mildred's kitchen. A young man with kind eyes and hands made for dough and patience. He never tried to make Lily talk, never filled the air with noise. He had watched her the way good chefs do, without rush, without judgment, with total attention. They spoke in flavor profiles, in sauces and salts. They had fallen for each other across chopping boards and shared ovens, and when he proposed, He didn't use a ring. He served her a dish she had once described as her comfort on the hardest day. A plate of grilled eggplant with miso glaze, paired with black garlic mash, and a tiny note beneath the napkin that read, "Return home to me?" She said yes. The wedding was held at return. Not because they needed to by then. Lily could have afforded any venue in Oregon, but because it was home. It was the kitchen that had raised her, the walls that had heard her first words, the soup that had saved her. We invited no more than 50 people. Mostly staff, friends, and the quiet few who had stood by us when silence was the only language Lily knew. The dining room was strung with warm lights. Wooden tables were lined with thyme sprigs and linen runners. There was no DJ. Just a string quartet tucked in the corner and the scent of roasted lemon chicken drifting through the doorways. The menu? 7 courses. The same 7 dishes Lily had presented in court. Each one a chapter. Each one a memory. The first course arrived in white bowls, steam curling into the rafters. Chicken soup. The same soup that had broken her silence at 5 years old. But this time, it was she who served it. She carried the tray herself, hands steady. And when she reached me, 82 now, hair silver, knees stiff but mind sharp, she gently set the bowl in front of me and knelt beside my chair. Then she said it. Her voice didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't drop. She looked me dead in the heart and whispered, "This is good, Grandma." The same 6 words, 17 years apart. I tried to speak, couldn't. My chest swelled too full to hold anything back. I laughed, then cried, then laughed again through tears. "Child," I finally managed, "turns out a pot of chicken soup can feed a soul." And in that moment, everything I had ever carried, every sleepless night, every tear I'd cried while she stared out windows, every ache from being called a babysitter instead of a mother lifted. Gone. She was free now. Not because the world had changed, but because she had made a place in it where no one could take her voice again. At the far end of the room, someone had left the small television on above the bar. The sound was off, but the caption scrolled across. "Mr. Carter is to be investigated for forgery and extortion." Months later, following a federal review, Jack Carter was sentenced to a 3-year suspended sentence. No one looked. No one needed to. His name had already been forgotten. What mattered was this room. This love. This soup. I watched Lily and Paul dance later, not like a performance, not a routine. Just a slow sway, 2 chefs holding each other like they were still measuring ingredients by feel. His hand never left her back. Her head fit perfectly beneath his chin. I sat, watching, grateful beyond words. Not for revenge, but for the right ending. One built slowly, deliberately, with heat, patience, and love. When the night ended and guests began to leave, one of the servers brought me a to-go container of the soup. "Chef said this one's for tomorrow," she whispered. I smiled. Some gifts are too sacred to finish in one sitting. That night, I fell asleep holding that container like a letter from a life I thought I had lost. A reminder that healing doesn't roar, it simmers. And sometimes, it tastes just like home. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of the quiet power of love, the way healing can arrive not in noise but in nourishment, then we hope you'll stay with us. At Grandma True Stories, we believe the most extraordinary stories are the ones simmering just beneath the surface. So, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, share this story with someone who needs a little warmth, and come back soon. There's always more on the stove.